Hello, and welcome back to Chasing Masculinity. Today, I'm joined by Walt Taylor, who is the author of Forging a Legacy, and we talk about just that, forging a legacy and the importance of faith as the foundation and being in tune with your physical health and having brothers around you and everything that has to do with building a legacy as a man. So, tune in to today's episode to learn about what legacy means and how you can build one. Walt Taylor, thank you so much for joining me today.
Colton, thanks for having me. I certainly appreciate it.
What does it mean to leave a legacy?
Yeah, I'm assuming you're talking about the book, and so the book is Forging a Legacy. And what the concept is that as we go throughout life, there's we can either leave nothing behind, right? Be no instrument of God for our lives going forward, or in reverse. So for me, leaving a legacy is creating a legacy for my kids and my grandkids, one of faith, family, and just being faithful to the word, right? And so that's the main issue when I think of leaving a legacy, and then the part that I think I really focus in on the book is about how to try to do that. Whether it's through physical things, spiritual things, brotherhood things, not much just simpler than I don't have 25 rules, right? But mine's a little more condensed than that, but similar to what your book's found.
Do you think that there's a disconnect between the secular and the non secular world about what a legacy could mean?
I definitely do. I think in a secular world, and this is just my opinion, so it may not be completely accurate, but I think people think that means that I've done some grand thing. Like there's going to be a monument built after me, or I've left millions of dollars to my kids. Versus where I think the real legacy is, do your kids know you, and do they know how that you followed Christ, and can they model that based on what you showed them? I think that's the true, portion of forging a legacy.
Do you think, why do you think the reason is that so many men have just misunderstood or have fallen short about just even on the definition of what a legacy is?
It's a good question. I think the biggest part of that is I think we've lost our way. I think that we've become maybe a cultural Christian and not a committed Christian. If we're just talking about the church, right? Outside the church, I think it's if you have no true north in your life, then you don't have any legacy to leave. And so I think that's the key things is being a committed Christian, doing the things that you need to do, and then being an example for both your kids and your grandkids.
I was Dr. Mark Teague. He is the one I spoke to, and he had a really good grounding point in his life, which was your North Star. Find your North Star. And that could be a message that would be both for Christians and non Christians, but obviously from the Christian viewpoint, which is the foundation of how Christians would view the world. It's the North Star is it's God, it's Jesus, right? And that is your guiding principle in all the decisions that you've made. And he said that actually really helped him in times where it was immensely difficult and he was struggling to provide for his family in times of maybe some economic struggle or just the time he had to commit was not what he wanted. That helped him determine his priorities in life, right? And reoriented him
Right.
towards what's proper.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, think of it. We think of distractions that we have, and I don't think we do a good job of nailing down that that's a word that's a compound word, right? It's dis and it's traction. So, what's our traction in life? Well, our traction needs to be focusing on the Lord, focusing on His Word, and the things that I need to do in my life to keep that focus and don't allow those distractions, right? And so, I think we lose that traction part a lot of times when we're talking about leaving a legacy.
So I do want to dive a lot more into what leaving a legacy means from a Christian viewpoint, but I want to maybe start by talking about a warning or an issuance of maybe hesitation towards if you are not a Christian or like you mentioned a cultural Christian but not necessarily somebody who's actually walking in the footsteps and just says they believe in Christian and believe in some sort of higher power. What would be the downsides or what would be your warnings to somebody who is approaching trying to leave a legacy, trying to do something, but from the standpoint not based in Christ, not as not a Christian, as somebody who wants to leave maybe more of the secular view of a legacy?
Yeah, I think one of the ways I might answer that, Colton, is through kind of the book that kind of inspired me to write this book. I don't know if you've read the book Comfort Crisis by Michael Easter. It is it's a well done book. I don't have any issues with what he wrote necessarily, but what I do have is the thematics of it, right? It was on evolution. It was on, standing on your own 2 feet. It was do this for yourself, be these things, all by yourself was what he was trying to say. Where you know, kind of my testimony about the book is as I was rucking around our neighborhood, I remember vividly coming around a corner and saying, Lord, this guy's got it all wrong. I mean, his message is, I think, pure that you need to be healthy. There's, different steps you need to make. But if I'm going to be on a worldly focus, if it's an evolutionary standpoint that I have, if it's about being a man's man, so to speak, he's really missing the mark. And I remember a distinct voice saying, well, what are you going to do about it? And I was like, don't know where that came from, but I don't know this guy is my response. I don't know him. It's not like I can pick up the phone and call him and say, hey, let's sit down and talk about this. And then secondly, the same question, well, what are you going to do about it? And I was like, I, I'm confused. I don't know what's going on here. And then third was, what are you going to do about it? I said, what do you want me to do? Write a book? And then no more questions. And so it was really just an incredible sense. I remember just in the exact point in our neighborhood that I was in when I did that. And that's the thing. If we are thinking that we can pull our own bootstraps up, right? If we think, let me show my kids how strong I am about how I, you know, maybe beat up a guy or whatever it is, right? That's how I saw things is through being, this real big tough guy. And I don't ever show any emotions and I don't ever do anything that, you don't ever see me happy about something or something like that. If you follow what I'm saying, that's that I think that's where a lot of secular men go, that they live this persona that's not a Christ-like persona.
I think
And
that's a
that's the
common
important part.
pitfall of a modern man is there's a desire. There's something that feels masculine about the solo entrepreneur, the cowboy, right? Someone who can just buckle down, like you said, pull it by your bootstraps and just do it and get through the hard part yourself. There's something that feels masculine about that, and I think it's a trap that a lot of people fall into.
I agree. I mean, I think some of that, well, God has put in men to be leaders. And so I think innately by God's design that we want to be that type of person. We want to lead, we want to be out front. But if we don't do it God's way, then we're just going down a different path that, leads to destruction, per the Bible, right? And so getting our North Star, getting like with me talking about how to forge your legacy, there's one of the key things I talk about is you have to start stacking habits on top of habits. I don't know if you've ever read the book Redeeming Productivity by Reagan Rose, but in that book, his primary thing is he's a productivity person, obviously. But one of the things he talks about is power mornings. And this is really what turned my life around on how to do this. I mean, ultimately, I can talk about how not only the book Comfort Christ, but how my dad impacted me on this. But specifically, what Reagan taught me in this book was power mornings, which means there's prayer, organization, word, exercise, and reading. And he's like, you need to do these things every morning. And he said, you don't have to do them all. Like if you're starting from scratch, start one of them and then just start stacking habits. It's really critical to start your day off with prayer, one-on-one time with Christ. And one of the things that really impacted me in my prayer life was when I really sat down and said, what does the word Lord mean? How does how does that impact my life? Well, number one, that made me change the way I pray. I get down on one knee now at the kitchen table and I pray because I've got to, respect my Lord and Savior as I should. And so I think that right then puts my whole, just the physical act of doing that puts your mind in a framework that's like, okay, I'm ready here to be, I don't want to say the word release, but understand that there's a higher power. There's someone that's more important than me. There's someone that can show me the way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, like you're subjugating yourself to something higher.
Yeah, exactly. And that physical act of going on one knee just sets the tone. And then, the next part is reading his word. And one of the big things that I mentioned, I think in the book where I talk about, Christ says, "Depart from me, that I never knew you," right? There's that part that he says, "I know you did all these things, but I never knew you." Well, that never knew is almost like a passionate love in Hebrew. And so the thing is, if you passionately love somebody, you talk to them, you get to know them, you know what their wants are, you know what they desire from you. And so if you're not reading the word and you're not praying every morning, and I think the morning is the perfect time to do it, obviously, to start your day off right. But if you're not doing those things, how are you getting to know Christ? What are you really doing in your relationship with him? You're not building one. So those two parts of the power of morning are extremely critical. I don't know if you've seen something similar in your own life.
I have. In fact, it was just thinking about that and bridging that into legacy. I was talking to Drew Dick, who's a author and podcast host and speaker, and he said he had to stop reading the Bible on his phone specifically for his kids because he was doing this good thing, but it just looked like he was sitting there scrolling on his phone. So he said it's not necessarily performative, but he had to show, like, no, I'm actually sitting down and doing this for the sake of showing, leading by example. Like, I'm actually doing this thing in front of his kids so they could witness that.
Well, I hadn't thought about that way. I have thought about that and did that for tithing at church. You can put it on a credit card and no one ever, you just pass the plate by. You don't actually put anything in. But I thought it was important for our kids when they're younger for us to for them to actually see us physically putting a check in there and them understanding what that was for. So never thought about it in the way that he was talking about, but I have thought about it in other ways.
It's interesting because there's a balance of, is this performative? Am I doing this? Am I the people at the temple putting in all the loud coins for everyone to hear, or am I doing this out of the true and humble heart of a desire to want to read the Bible, want to tithe, but also there has to be some level of performance when you're raising children because that is what parenthood is modeling something, and modeling is performative. So it's an interesting dichotomy there that you have to balance as a parent.
No, definitely. But when I wrote the book, um, I thought about what Christ did every day. I mentioned rucking earlier. And I don't know if you've ever been to the Holy Land, but I've been there. And look how far it is from Galilee to the Dead Sea and all these in Jerusalem and all these places. And you realized, I'll just use my term, that he rucked all those places. He was probably carrying something weighted on his back, walking all these places. So for me, exercise, is key to, well, let me just say it this way. One of our pastors that we said a long time ago told me, he said, the easiest way to reach more people to Christ is to live longer. He said, if you just live longer, you're going to reach more people because it's just a mathematical certainty. And so exercise is a key point of that. And that's one of the things I mentioned in the book, that if you're not eating right and you're not exercising, then your body's going to fail. And the same thing is, you're not modeling what a good lifestyle is for your kids if you don't do those things. And I can tell you, I'm 58 now. When I was 38, I definitely wasn't modeling that. So it's come a long way.
So that's a great segue into fitness because I think that's a junction that you and I share a very similar passion. And just in general, you kind of touched on it, but why is fitness so important, specifically from the Christian lens?
Yeah, I think, like I said, number one is, I don't think we look at it as a way of, what did Christ do? He, walked, I guess it was probably 70,000 steps a day. You have no idea exactly how many. I'm not suggesting that he was out there running, but we know that he was a carpenter. And we know specifically during that time, he didn't have like machines picking things up. I'm sure they had simple machines to pick things up. But, he's working with his hands every day and he's doing things. And I don't know about you, but remember when I was growing up watching my father do physical labor, it made me think about how strong he was, and how if he ever said, look, if you do something wrong, it's going to be a physical discipline coming on you. And you're like, wow, I'm fearful of that. But that's a respect fear, not one that I was worried that he was going to hurt me. It was understanding that I have to be fearful of my dad and a sense of respect. That's the same way that we should be with Christ, right? I mean, we have to have a fear of him in knowing that there's discipline out there. And so anyway, for me, that whole idea of for me, it's rucking. Other people, it may be jogging. I use kettlebells a lot because I think they're a really good tool because they mimic everyday things like carrying buckets and all kinds of things that you do in everyday life. And it's easy to work out with kettlebells from the house. You don't need a whole gym to do that. But with you need to have physical exercise, you need to have cardio, you need to have weightlifting, you need to eat properly. I don't know if you've ever read the book, Why Do We Get Sick? But it talks about eating proteins instead of carbohydrates and all these things. And I think about that Jesus is the bread of life, definitely. But I do think he probably had a pretty high protein diet. He ate a lot of fish, it looks like, from what we read in scripture. So I think modeling yourself again as Christ lived, one of the things we talk about in prayer, or specifically going off on your own. And one of the things that's known as from a psychological standpoint for men specifically is that they should go off and go into the wilderness and go into the forest by themselves, get away from all the distractions and spend time with God by themselves, with no tie to the phone and things like that. Obviously, if you go too far, you might need to figure out a way to get back. But there's times that we need to be. I don't know about you. Well, you're based in Colorado, you probably do 14,000s all the time. I don't have anything like that here, but we do go camping and we do go out hiking. And I do a lot of that time on my own. But being out in nature and seeing something like that, not only I think is reflecting what Christ did because he went off by himself quite often, and he did spend 40 days in the wilderness. That is something else that we should do to be a reflection of Christ. And I don't know, did I hit what you were trying
Yeah,
to talk
yeah,
about?
absolutely. Well, yeah, I agree that I think for many reasons, physical fitness and just physical health in general is a way to honor God. There's many ways to honor God, and it's not just being a pastor at a church, right? You can honor him in many different ways. Like Tim Keller said, you can honor him through any career that you have just by doing it well. And Paul says the same thing. And it's the same with physical health. Is that is
Right.
honoring to God since these bodies are not our own. But then there's that balance you mentioned, weightlifting, physical resistance training. That's what I love. That's certainly where I probably put too many eggs in that basket. But I think there's always that balance, and I've been wrestling with this for a very long time. The balance between physical health and then vanity, specifically when you're doing weightlifting, training like a traditional bodybuilder as well, because then you certainly can easily, and people very much do devolve into that sort of vanity. And so with that, do you think that Christians in general have neglected or been a little bit more hesitant in terms of their physical stewardship?
From a vanity standpoint,
Yeah, and just in general, Christians neglecting physical stewardship as well.
oh yeah, neglecting. Yeah, I do. I mean, one of the things that you've probably seen this as you've gotten more healthy and you've been doing physical exercise, strength training, things like that. You'll see men in church that their waistline's too big, that they can't stand up without grabbing the pew in front of them. And you go, you're becoming really frail. And Christ was not a frail person. He was strong. And we are built to be strong. We were built to run the race, right? And so these are things, physical activities spoken of specifically in the Bible about, not only as alliteration, but I think specifically commanding us to do these things. From vanity standpoint, the biggest thing I can say is I'll never have six pack abs, but that's not my goal. My goal is, hey, the cardiologist says everything's good. I can go out and play with my great grandson or my grandson at this point. Hopefully soon, in a few years, I have a great grandson. But to be able to go out there, throw the football, kick the soccer ball, go hiking, go camping, those are the times of enjoyment and times to spend together. And again, that's that whole modeling and forging a legacy with them is seeing these things. And it gives you opportunity when you're out there doing those things to have conversations you wouldn't have if you're watching a ball game together, right? Although I love watching football games, but I'm a big Auburn football fan. But I don't get to have the same conversations as when I'm out hiking with. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. How has fitness influenced your own spiritual journey and development as you've this progress of writing this book?
Yeah, for me, um, it's probably easier for you because you're much younger than me. But I remember specifically thinking sometimes when I'm swinging the kettlebell, saying, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Because there's times I'm going like, this is way too hard. This is, yeah, I'm sweating and my heart rate's at 140 or something like that. And I'm just like, Lord, is this really worth it? And in my mind, I go, our life, and this is where the Comfort Crisis book comes in. We've become so sedentary. We sit at our desk. We do knowledge work instead of physical work. And so the idea that we have to get up and do exercises is really to supplement the life that we now have. When in previous generations, they didn't have to do that because they're out mending fences. They're doing all kinds of physical labor all the time. And I think it's unique to our, probably starting with my generation, even your generation in this situation where we do a lot of knowledge work. Do you follow with that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Do you think that men, or why do you think, I guess, that men struggle so much in the realm of fitness to stay consistent, especially if they're fueled by things like you mentioned, needing to provide for the family, needing to be the backbone, the needing to carry the weight and responsibility, and yet there's still, I don't want to say there's a lack of motivation, but they're just the consistency appears to be lacking in that sense.
Yeah, I'd say two things. One is busyness, right? I mean, that is I live the corporate lifestyle. I don't necessarily live that way now, but I did used to, head to work at 6 o'clock in the morning and get home at 6 o'clock at night. And you're like, do I really want to work out after this? I lived in Atlanta for a long time and I was in traffic, 2.5, 3 hours a day. And that will just wear you down. So I get that. I understand how that's difficult. I think that's though when you go back and you say, I don't know about you, but when I was living that way, I got up just in time to get ready to get to work on time. No, get up in the morning. Like now I get up at 5:30 in the morning and I start my day then. And I can get in Bible reading, prayer, reading, rucking 3.5 miles, all those things now, because now not only do I get up earlier, I get to bed earlier, so I'm more well rested. I mean, I know that you know this, but if you don't get your rest, you just can't manage every day. You can skip a day and have a bad night or whatever, but 2 or 3 days in a row, and all of a sudden you're just dragging and you don't want to do anything. So I think, from the way that we eat makes us feel tired. We're eating a lot of processed foods, a lot of carbohydrates. I mean, how many times, after you eat a big meal, you just go sit down and you fall asleep watching television. That's some of the key things that, if we're not paying attention to, and I think, specifically for me, because, I didn't mention this part, but I didn't really start taking this seriously until my father passed away. He was a captain in the Air Force, was fought in Vietnam, came back. Like I said, he had a real job of being physical. He was a mechanic working on cars and things. And then he was a Gideon and he's got older. I could just see him getting frail because he stopped doing those things. He started, working from the home and sitting in front of the computer. And I'd say, hey, do you want to go walking? He's like, no, I don't feel like it. And I'm like, well, the problem is you don't feel like it because you don't do it. Right. Once you start doing it, you start missing it. And so, but just before he passed away, he said, Walt, you really need to lose weight and you need to start getting active. He was actually talking to me what I was talking to him about. And I was like, yeah, 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 because I was more worried about what was going on with him. And he said, well, that's what I want for Father's Day. And that was the Father's Day before he passed. And after I got through handling all his affairs and things like that, it took us several months. But then the Lord really just kind of laid upon my heart, what your dad's telling you is right. You need to lose weight. So from doing those different things, I lost about 40 pounds. And so uh, that's that's really the testimony of the crazy thing is my wife said, I've been talking to you for years. Why didn't you ever do it? And I said, well, you didn't die. So
I'm not sure. Are you
uh,
familiar with Dr. Mike Israetel?
Yeah, yeah.
I heard him say that. So he his company, they've done just independent studies and stuff, polling, and there's life expectancy, and then there's life, or your longevity, and then you have your actual quality of life. So there's a quantitative value of how much you can actually do at that age. And he said the number one thing for that quality of life metric is the weight on your body. That is the number one determinant of not necessarily how long you can live, although they're very well correlated, but specifically how well you can just do things as you age is surely how much weight does your body just have to lug around. And I say this as somebody who is larger. I have a bigger stature. I'm always going to be heavier in weight. I don't ever see me being under 200 pounds. So I'm already at a disadvantage there. And even though I'm fairly lean right now, I very easily could not be. And so I know at a very lean, probably 12% body fat, if I'm still going to be 210 pounds, there is no reason for me to neglect, or it would be very inappropriate or very I guess, yeah, just not cultivating my body well to just have more weight, have more fat on top of what my body weight's already going to be, knowing that that's just going to push me even further past the limit of what my body can take and handle as it ages.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm sure you've read, as I've read, this body fat draws all kind of extra stress on your internal organs, heart specifically, right? And so, and especially if you don't exercise your heart, it wears out like any other muscle. And so that's why it's so important to go out and do some type of cardio and strength exercising. I think you probably know this as well. You got to combine those two, and they build off of each other, right? You can certainly outwork your body. You can certainly work it way too hard and go way too hard. And I've done that. Never been injured, thank goodness. But there's days that I've woken up and I was like, man, that was probably not the best thing for me to do. But one of the key things for me, and the reason I wrote the book also was it's never too late to start. I don't know if you've ever seen the Honest Channel. It's a chick channel, to be honest with you. But what brought me to that channel was that she started weightlifting, and then she's got her 80-year-old and 78-year-old, 80-year-old father and 78-year-old mother to start as well. And
Wow.
then she chronicled that in her videos. It's a YouTube channel. She chronicled that over a year, and her dad is lifting is on a straight just deadlift probably as much as I can. And her mom, who couldn't walk more than a couple of feet without a walker, is now walking on her own for like 20 minutes. And I was like, they started later than life than I did. But it just proves that when you start working your muscles, they start working with you, right? They're not working against you. And when you're just loading your body up with junk and you're not trying to physically work yourself, your body starts working against you. And I don't know how you feel, but when you start doing that, as far as working out and things like that, you sense that your body, it's like drinking water, right? When you drink water initially, first thing in the morning, your body just soaks it in. It's like, I miss this. I want this. And the same is true with exercise. I don't know if you feel that way as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I've always been of the mindset that you should exercise to the point that, or you should find a fitness routine that you do consistently to the point that you are addicted to it. Not to the degree that it's controlling you, but that you can control it, essentially. So I view addiction as a tool, not necessarily good or bad. Obviously, it's mostly bad, right? Right. It has a lot of evil holds on people. But if you do it so frequently to the point where it feels like water, where it feels like I'm dehydrated, I haven't done this in a long time, I need to work out. My body is telling me, red alarm, you got to go work out right now. It's been too long. Then that is a great motivation, a great tool. And if you can control that and you don't allow that to take control of your life, you essentially can just, instead of forcing it, it is not necessarily forcing you. You control the tap. The motivation's already there, and now you get to control it, and that's a really fun place to be. It's not fun when you've been up for 14 plus hours, and you've been at work for 10 of those, and it's an exhausting day, and you just want to go to bed, and you haven't worked out yet, and you know you have to. That's not as
Right.
fun. That's not an enjoyable moment. But then you do it and you feel better, and that's just a part of doing the hard things when your body and your life around you is telling you you don't have to do this and you do it anyway. That's the
Right.
cultivation of, well, of a legacy too.
Exactly. Well, I think what you're talking about for me, since I don't live where it snows very often, but if I get up in the morning and it's a thunderstorm, it's like, okay, I'm just going to get wet today. It's going to be an hour out in the rain, and whatever it is, it is. Or, if it's 20 degrees outside, that's about as cold as it gets around here normally. You just get out and go, and it's like, by the time you're out there 15 minutes, it's just like any other day. It's really harder when it's nice outside because you start sweating like crazy, or at least I do. And it's like, man, it was easier when it was freezing cold. And then, but the other side of that is if you start getting up at 5:30 in the morning or whatever time would work for you, this is where that stacking habits comes on. All of a sudden, you don't have to set your alarm. I mean, I still do, but you'll wake up before your alarm goes because it's like, no, we know it's time to get up. Your body's like, it's time to get up and get to work on these things. And and then or at least what I've learned is the days that I wanted to turn over and go back to sleep, I can't get back to sleep because my body's like, no, we're programmed now to do these things. So I can't fall back asleep, and which is more frustrating than just going ahead and getting up and doing it, right?
I would agree with that. So what advice would you give to somebody who is, they're a Christian, they're younger in life, and they're not not exercising, they're not taking care of or stewarding their physical body? What advice would you give them to, say, square one, get started?
Yeah, square one, again, I say it a lot, stacking habits on top of habits. Square one is you've got to go ahead and get up in the morning, get your prayer life, get your Bible reading in. I'm not a reader, and I've never been, but now that I read about 15 minutes every morning, I fly through books, and it's just incredible how much I'm learning just from a few minutes. But then going ahead and doing your organize that day. That's the O part of the power morning is organizing your day. It's so nice to know that when I'm up early in the morning, way before everybody else, and go ahead and plan out my day. It's like, oh yeah, I've got this meeting, I've got this meeting, I need to prepare this way, versus the way I used to live my life was, oh no, I forgot all about that meeting. I've not even gotten ready yet for this meeting, and then boom, it's here. But go ahead and get up and start doing these habits and start one. My preference is you start with prayer, then you start with reading the word, and then exercising will just be another part of that. And if it's just 1,000 steps a morning, that's 1,000 steps you didn't take yesterday. And then next week, make it 2,000 steps, make it 3,000 steps. If you're a runner, run that half mile, run that mile, then run a 5K. I'm not a runner, but that's why I ruck. And I started rucking with a 20-pound pack. And when I got up to 45 pounds, my wife said, "You're still just carrying the same weight you had before. You just carried it all on your back instead of your front." And so, um, you know, that's true. It certainly feels different when you're carrying 45 pounds on your back than when I was bigger. But, when you're able to get to a point where I think one of the things you're talking about is I'm not trying to outpace everybody else. And I don't think that's your goal. I think your goal is what works for me, but you do need to push yourself. You can't, just like in the Christian lifestyle, you have to get closer with God. If you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards because we never stand still, right? And so progressing through prayer, progressing through Bible reading, progressing through exercise. I mean, I think Israel talks about that, right? Periodization and doing those things. So you're progressively weighting yourself. And then obviously you might have to take a break for a week and kind of slow down and do something slower and let your body relax and then start up. It's no different than exercising. All these things you work progressively. You don't need to get to the point where you're sprinting all day long necessarily, but if you can do a sprint for a while or things like that, and you're not competing against anyone, you're just competing against yourself. I think that's one of the key things. Now, if you need someone to help motivate you, that's great. And that's what Brotherhood's about, accountability and things like that. But you don't want to make it a race or a competition. You don't want to go to the gym with the guy and say, "Oh, I can bench press 200." And he's like, "Oh, I can do 250." And then next thing you know, the barbell drops on your head, right? The, but you do want to say, you know what? I know what I'm physically capable of. And as long as I'm pressing that and moving just a little bit further, And then you'll get to a point where, if it's 200 on the bench press, that's all you can ever do. That's fine. God's not asking you to be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, but he is asking you to take care of yourself both physically and spiritually.
So I like how you mentioned right off the bat, talking about discipline, something that probably one of the most tangible and thought of traits or categories of discipline being physical fitness, working out. You immediately went to faith as the foundation first, which I think is very important. So what would happen then if somebody were to pursue discipline, physical or otherwise, without having faith as their foundation first?
I think they've been misguided. And we talked about that at the beginning of the conversation, right? I think your now physical fitness may be your true north, so to speak, right? And not what Christ has for you in your life. And if you're not putting him first and you're not meeting with him first, then you're directionless throughout the day. Just like we talked about how physical exercise was like drinking water. Well, it's just like Christ said to the woman at the well, he's the living water, right? And so if you start your day with the living water, then the day it's not going to have no problems, right? You're still going to have issues. But if you start your day every morning like that, you're going to desire to have that every morning. And I think that's what Christ is really wanting. Desire to have a relationship with me. Make it something you don't want to miss. Just like with your wife, you don't want to miss a day with her. And if you do, it hurts. And so what can I do to make sure that that relationship is a well-found relationship? My wife's a flight attendant. She's been flying with Delta for 37 years, so she's gone along on mornings. But when she's, for days even. But when she's back, it's like, man, I've really missed you. And so, taking care of that relationship is very important, second only to your relationship with Christ, and then your children after that. So that is that what
Yeah,
you're kind of
it
thinking
does.
of?
It sounds like having faith as a foundation, then having the proper North Star, like you said, is a way to prevent vanity in the gym. It's a way to stop physical fitness or your looks being the North Star.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't think, typically, um, like I always wear oversized shirts because I don't want people to see anything. One, before when I first got started, I was too big. I didn't want to see anything. And now it's like, it's just more comfortable. I don't need to worry about but you'll see guys at the gym with shirts off and things like that. I have no problem with that. But if you're doing that for the wrong reason, if you're really just hot, fine, take your shirt off. That's fine. But if you're doing that because you're trying to get attention, well, that's not the way that you should be handling that. And I think that's just as true for females as well.
Yeah, I think vanity in specifically the female fitness industry is probably, I don't want to say it's a larger issue, but it seems to be a larger issue because I think that's what a lot of, I guess, the social media bodybuilder for both men and women, it's for men it's all about the arms and the chest and looking good shirtless, and I suppose for the females it would be the big glutes and quads and stuff. So I suppose it's probably equal in both those regards, but I feel like especially at the gym and with women's apparel, gym apparel, it's very much based in how can we contour this and make this look good here so that you look good with the least amount of clothes possible, sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, just in physical fitness, when you're thinking about let's say you're in your Sunday school and you shake somebody's hand, a firm handshake means a lot, right? And if you have a frail handshake, that says something about you. And I think, when we were talking about that just a second ago about, vanity and things like that, you're not doing it to be vain. You're doing it to be the man that God's wanted you to be, to have that firm handshake, to be able to stand firm in front of your family, to be able to hold your ground. One of the things that talks about the Bible and the reason that the reading the word is so important to me is it talks about having a logical explanation for your faith, right? Well, if you're not in the word every day, how are you going to have that? And that's critical. I mean, I don't know if you've ever read Greg Koukle's book Tactics, but it's all about having conversations with people and not necessarily witnessing to bring them to Christ that day. But what he talks about is be the stone in their shoe. Give them just a nugget, just enough to say, could he be right about that? And that's a key point for me. If you can't have conversations about your faith, and be able to stand up to somebody. What does the Bible say about X? Or, hey, if you're sitting on a plane somewhere there and they strike up a conversation with you, be prepared to have a conversation. You don't need to get them to get baptized on the plane right then, but you do want to be able to say, this is why I live my life this way, and give them something to really chew on and really think about.
Yeah, and that's a good point about you mentioned the habit stacking. Atomic Habits, James Clear talks about the habit stacking too, right? Where if you already have a good thing, add the new thing you want on top of it, and it becomes easier to do both. If you already are strong in your faith, you're already someone who reads their Bible, prays regularly, has a good walk in faith with Christ, but really struggles with the consistency or the discipline of physical fitness, or just hasn't even started to stack those together, and the discipline aspect, not necessarily the actions, but the actual discipline that's cultivated in each of those, and it goes both ways, helps you with the next habit. So if you're someone who is very has no problem going to the gym, is somebody who is very in tune with their physical health and has the habits already built for physical discipline, the habits of discipline, not necessarily the habits of I know how to bench heavy, but the habits that get you to be a disciplined person can be translated into doing the other thing that's hard.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's just like we talked about progressing with our weights as we're working out. The same thing happens when you're reading the word. You start going like one of the things that I've true Bible study to me is I learned it from, and I mentioned this in the book, the YouTube channel Wise Disciples. Nate Sala is his YouTube channel, and he has a Bible study where he talks about we're going to read the same passage 5 days a week for a whole week, and we're going to ask questions about those. It's not one of these, you may not have been like this, but as I was growing up, I just opened up the Bible and read whatever, and then moved on to the next thing. Well, that's not disciplined Bible study. And just like you need to be disciplined in your prayer life and your physical life, your Bible study needs to be disciplined as well. So what does that look like? So if you got to have a plan for it. So the way he describes it is your first day is you're saying, well, who's this message to? Who's in the conversation? What's the original lesson for them? How can we apply this to you? And then what are you going to do about it? More or less are his 5 days if you're going over the same thing. And one of the things I really learned from that is, yeah, this is how you study. This is how you go through the Bible, is you literally concentrate on 10 to 15 verses every morning and review those same ones, read them in different translations, look in some different study Bibles, use whatever Bible study software you may have, but really get into that and really focus in on a few chapter or a few verses at a time. I don't know if you've done something similar or do something similar.
I have, yeah, and it always amazes me everywhere I've gone. Um, Most churches will have some sort of, or have done some sort of, how to read your Bible course, or how to. That's pretty much it. It's how to read your Bible, right? 101, Bible 101, whatever you want to call it. How many people who could be a Christian their whole life then go through something like that? And they're like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. Oh, that's how it's done. And it's one of those things where I don't know if it's inherently intuitive, unless you've actually studied. If you go to a theological course, or you've taken seminary, that's how you are taught to preach
Right.
exegetically, right? And that's kind of how you would read your Bible. But outside of that, I don't think it's, oh, I'm just going to sit down. I'm gonna read through Genesis today. Well, no, you're not, but you're gonna miss a lot if you just do that. So
Right.
it makes sense, but it's something that I think, again, going back to the importance of brotherhood, you need people around you to tell you these things, because if you just pick up your Bible one day and start reading, that might not be as intuitive.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's the accountability of brotherhood. There's the I need someone to talk to part of brotherhood, right? Um, when we lived in Atlanta, I was part of a group called Iron Forums, and it was where Christian entrepreneurs got together and talked. And so it was divided up. You there almost the entire day, but you divided the day up into one like a training session. But the bigger impact was what we had were called roundtables, where we would go around and we had this form that we had to fill out. This was once a month. We had a form we had to fill out, and the first question was, rate your relationship with Christ 1 to 10, and why. Rate your relationship with your wife 1 to 10, and why. Oh, by the way, tell her to rate you 1 to 10, and why. That's a tough conversation. Now, when you first start doing that, well, number one, she's like, why are you asking me this? But number two, as you start doing this every month, real conversations happen. And then the number three was to do the same thing with your kids. And then you'd go down and say, rate your business, how's your profitability? How's your marketing plan? All these things. And we would all go over these sheets in our roundtable of about 4 or 5 guys. And you really start to learn things about people, and you really start to be transparent with yourself, because as other men are transparent, you become more transparent. As you learn to trust others, they learn to trust you. When they know you care, that you know that they care. A lot of times you have to be that first person to make that, right, to extend transparency. um, but what you learn is, well, one is, oh, other people have to deal with this too. I could have sworn I was the only one, because I don't know anybody at work that's going through this. And you find out actually probably everybody at work is going through this, right? I remember specifically my wife and I were talking. It's just like, no, nobody's kids act like our kids. I was like, oh no, I know they do. I talk to men every day where they're dealing with the same thing. And it was interesting. We actually had an Irons couples meeting, and the wives started talking. I mean, we got them started, but the wives started talking all of a sudden. And as we were leaving, my wife was like, "So we're not so different after all." I'm like, "No, we're not different. We don't." So so what it does is allows you to be transparent, allows you to open up. It also allows you to do those same things with Christ. As you become more open to others, you're going to be more open to Christ. So
On the topic of brotherhood, why do you think it's so difficult for men specifically to form these close friendships?
because we don't have any weaknesses, Colton. That's why. Everything's perfect. Everything's going fine. And we don't want to ever share anything that's negative. No, I mean, the first thing, how are you doing? Oh, everything's good. How are you doing? You know, it doesn't matter if the world's crackling underneath your feet. You're still going to say, I'm good. I'm good. What's going on with you? And so that's, to me, that's the number one reason, is because we don't want to ever show weakness.
My wife had an interesting challenge for us. It was a little over a year ago now, and I still try to keep up with it, but I'm not as good anymore. It was essentially just don't do the stereotypical small talk in response. When somebody says, "How are you?" you don't just say, "Good, how are you?" You have to you have to say something unique and honest every time. It can't just be a one word or a simple, like the typical phrase that people say, coworkers passing in the office. "Oh, how's it going?" "Oh, it's going," Like, you have to actually come up with a genuine response each time. And then maybe a
Right.
conversation will happen, maybe it won't. And we had to do that for a whole month. And that was very difficult, because every single time
Sure.
you pick up the phone at, you're sitting in the office, you get a dozen phone calls a day or whatever, and you pick up the phone. "Oh, hey, how's it going?" "Good, how are you?" And then you get into what the conversation's about. It's very hard to do something unique every single time on the fly. It makes you have to think. And that was very, very difficult. And like I said, I'm trying still, but I'm not very good at it. I get lazy,
Yeah.
and you just want to say, "Good, how are you?" and move on to whatever
The
conversation
real
you're trying to get
reason.
to. Yeah, exactly, the real reason. Um, and that was a really big challenge to do, is to get past that little small talk that I think so many of us just want to live in forever. Is
Right.
this little boundary that we're comfortable in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of like Facebook, right? I'm not on any social media, but rarely do people put on there what's really happening. Best face forward all the time on Facebook. And so I think that we live our lives like that way. But it's not, I don't know how well I would be with a stranger to do what you did. So that'd be, I think, difficult. Um, Man, it's really horrible today. It's really a tough day. What do you think about it? So I don't know how well I would do at that exercise. I'll think about that. That might be interesting. But it is, that transparency is what brotherhood is about. Because if you don't show yourself, how are you going to grow yourself? Is kind of the process. And
Hmm.
I think you can do that with your wife. You can do that with your children. They need to understand that you're vulnerable as well. And I'm not talking about excessively vulnerable, but that you don't know everything. Sometimes things fall apart and you don't know why. But that's how we lead to our faith walk. That's how we talk about it. I mean, one of the things I don't think we do a great job in the church is you know, discipline and disciple, same word, right? Just pronounced differently. Well, how many of us, if we want to truly walk like Christ, we want to follow the disciples' example, are we really prepared to die for him? Because almost all of them did, or is that the life that we're truly living? Christ died, the apostles died, all for the same reason. And are we really prepared to do that? And are you living a life that's uncomfortable enough to live that way?
So, looping that all back to legacy, what does this brotherhood have to do with cultivating a legacy?
Yeah. So brotherhood and legacy again is just like we talked about with forging a legacy with your family, with your kids. It's the same way with other men. Um, you can teach them, you can model for them how to do that. Hey, why don't we go to the gym together? Why don't we go witness to some people together? Why don't we do these things together and let me show you, let me mentor you if you're talking with younger people. Let me show you how to live this lifestyle. And brotherhood is the opportunity as iron sharpens iron, obviously, to allow you to do that. And I don't know everything, you don't know everything, but we can learn from others to how to make things better. Someone could teach me a better way to do Bible study. Someone can try to convince me that sprinting is a good thing to do. I don't think I would ever believe that. But there's other. Hey, Walt, this particular way, just think about recipes for eating. Oh, I never tried it this way. I never tried it that way. I didn't know you could still eat low carb and eat broccoli or whatever it may be. I think sharing information and learning from each other, that's the key to that brotherhood and leaving a legacy with them.
So, you wrote a book called Forging a Legacy.
Yeah.
And I think the one large area that we haven't touched on yet that I would love to get your input on is the family legacy. You have kids, you have a wife, you have this idea, this concept of a legacy. Okay, you can pursue it through fitness, you can pursue it through brotherhood. How do you leave a legacy to your family and I suppose to your kids, which would be where the legacy continues?
Yeah, through the kids and the grandkids. Yeah, I think a lot of that is what we've already talked about, modeling. You know, do you see me living the way? Do you see me studying the Bible? Do you see me praying? Are we just casually praying before dinner? Are we actually praying, something real? Um, and then the other part of that is, do you see how when things go bad, how did I stay faithful to my faith? How did I stay faithful to Christ and say, you know what, Lord, I don't know what's going on right now. I don't know why all of a sudden I got a $4,000 car repair bill. I was not prepared for that. But you know what? You're going to make a way. I'm not suggesting that he's going to give me $4,000 out of the sky. I'm just saying, Lord, you're going to make sure that we handle this. And it may be that we don't get to go on vacation. That's fine. And then to be able to say, look, kids, this is what happens when you hit crisis. You don't fall apart. You look forward and you look to Christ. One of the things I told my oldest son, I was taking him back to school one day. He was going through some issues, and I said, "Son, here's the thing: is the sun's going to come up tomorrow morning, whether you like it or not. So, what are you prepared to do about it? And what did God tell you that He's going to be there with you? And there's going to be times that the devil's going to try to make you think that you're all alone. But when you start talking to other people, you realize that you're not alone. And then you've got your mom and you've got me to lean on to as well. So I think the whole modeling part that they can see, oh, it's important to be in the word, it's important prayer is, it's important to exercise, and it's important to eat right, to do all these things. I mean, that was, like I said, the key for me is when I saw my, like I said, U.S. Air Force captain dad barely able to walk. And it was because he didn't do these things. He was a strong Christian, but when it came to physicalness, that just he just stopped. And it was hard to see. And that's what really, like I said, what really kicked me into gear to doing all these things, and ultimately inspired me to write the book.
Something I've always struggled with in my prayer life is praying, okay, like you said, something happens. Is it, Lord, make this go away? Make the $4,000 appear? Maybe that one, not quite as literal, but, you know, make this thing better, help me here? Or is it, give me the strength so I can do it? And
Yeah,
and there's a balance that, right, of in certain things it's he has prepared you and given you the tools and strength you need to lead your family, to do whatever it is. But in certain things, is this a me thing, or does this truly need to be put on him?
right. Yeah, I think that's a good question, Colton. And the way that I look at it is that we're taught to persevere. I mean, what does that mean? That means you're going to go through trouble. That doesn't mean that his life is going to be easy. I mean, he talks about the Bible talks about it a lot about persevering. You know, specifically, we talked about it earlier about I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That means all things. That means whatever I'm going through, the good and the bad. And, you get up in the morning and you start your prayer that morning and say, Lord, I don't know what's happening here. I don't know how this is happening. I don't know why it's happening. Maybe you're trying to show me that I'm taking a step in the wrong direction. If that's the case, make it obvious to me. Because right now I'm really confused. And I know I can't do this without you because I've tried that before and it definitely didn't work. Right. And so, Lord, show me how to lean on you during this time. Give me, strength and wisdom to know that you've got, plans for me to prosper. And again, I'm not talking about getting that $4,000, right? I'm talking about, your goal is for us to have a good life. It's not and when I say good life, a life that's meaningful for Him. And so that means that, you know, to be like him means that we're going to suffer. He was in the wilderness for 40 days. He went through all the temptations we've had. In Hebrews, it talks about that Christ is a sympathetic savior because he's been through the things that we've gone through. And if you think back and remember that when you're going through those times and say, I don't remember necessarily Christ, struggling with whatever this is, but the point is that he was tempted in similar ways that we are tempted. I mean, he had friends that died. He had friends that turned on him. Judas, how in the world did you ever think about him? John MacArthur talks about don't be a Judas branch, right? Don't live your life walking next to Christ and all of a sudden be dead to Christ, right? Be someone that's faithful in doing good works. We're saved by grace, but our faith shows that we do good works, or by good works we show our faith, right? And so, going through those tough times, that's how you model how to stay faithful, and that's what your kids need to see. And I think that's why you also need to be transparent with your kids too. It's like, look, I really wanted to go on that vacation. I really did. We all wanted to go on that vacation, but we got this big car bill we got to pay for, and that pretty much took all of our vacation money. So we're going to have a staycation this time. Now, honestly, my wife being a flight attendant, we're never going to have a staycation. She'll figure out some way to go somewhere. But the idea is that to model the whole concept of struggle is part of life. Struggle is, ever since Adam, you know, one of the things that's hit me before is people often ask you, if God is so good, why do we have bad things? And the answer is easy, but I never thought about it. It was God did build the perfect world, and it was called Eden, and we screwed it up. He tried that. He did everything that you would ask for. There was no death. There was no fear. Everybody had plenty to eat, and we still did the wrong thing. So that's not the answer, right? And so it took me a long time to kind of put that together. But I think, showing that struggle is real, and showing that faithfulness, it's easy to be faithful when everything's good. It's hard to be faithful when things aren't going right, right? So that was a long-winded answer, but hopefully I got something across.
No, that was great. That was beautiful. We've talked a lot about habits, different habits, habit stacking. What habits have the greatest long term impact on a family?
That's definitely going to be studying the word and prayer. Those are the beyond all the other ones. Those are foundational things that you have to do. Um, I think from that though, like we talked about stacking habits, if you realize, like I did, oh, wait, there's a physical thing that I'm supposed to do. Do I really want my kids to see me be frail and not be able to go outside with their kids? Is that what I want my grandkids to think about me? Is he's always just in a wheelchair? I don't want that. And I don't think Christ wants that either. He wants us to live long and do the things that we need to do to leave legacy for our kids and our grandkids. And there's multiple examples of that in the Bible. But the key is that by doing the spiritual work first, the other things will come in tune as long as you learn what those are. If you're ignorant to those things, either you don't know them or you don't want to know them. But there's enough information out there today where you can't be ignorant to those things.
So I have to ask you, what lessons do you hope your family remembers you by?
Yeah, number one is I hope that my prayer is that they would look at me and say, that's someone to model my life after. Not that he was perfect because he was far from perfect, but through all the rough edges, there was someone that had a heart of love and a heart of kindness.
Wow, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful place to end. Walt Taylor, everybody. Walt, thank you so much for joining me. Tell the people what you got going on and where they can find you.
Yeah, so the book is Forging a Legacy. The website is forgingalegacy.org. And that's where you can find out basically everything about the book and myself, and feel free to reach out there.
Perfect. Yeah, I will definitely make sure to include a link to
Okay.
the book and to the website so everyone can go and check that out.
All right, Colton. Well, thank you so much. It's been a great joy talking with you.
Yeah, this has been amazing. Very important conversation. Very important, I think, specifically for men who are preparing families, but just men in general, specifically Christians as well. And I'm glad that this is such a faith-based conversation as well. Thank you again for joining me, being willing to talk, and thank you everyone who's listening for your time and attention. I will see you in the next one.